In the pantheon of film franchises, perhaps none compares to Godzilla, which at this point has 33 feature films ranging from 1954 to the present, with more coming. For true G fans, every Godzilla film is worth a watch, but what about for someone who is new to the series? Is every movie a classic? I don't think so. And with so many films, it can be intimidating to break into the fandom. Where do you start? What films are representative of the spirit and character of Godzilla, and which films should be disqualified? Some would argue that a newbie G fan should simply start at the beginning and work their way through chronologically, but I disagree with this sentiment. In fact, in my opinion, for any new fan, I would recommend going for the most powerful, meaningful, and important films of the franchise. I'm going to offer 3 Godzilla films that I feel every true film buff should watch. But first, I'm going to explain why I left other films off the list. The very first films I'm going to leave off this list are the American-made Godzilla films. Now, the Legendary Pictures version of Godzilla is certainly entertaining, but no one would have disagreed with this sentiment following the 1998 blasphemy. That being said, I don't believe that any American Godzilla film is faithful to the original themes. Americanized versions of the Japanese films tend to water down the anti-nuclear weapon message. In my mind, the legendary Godzilla films feel like Michael Bay-style action films with no heart and no historical importance. Yes, the production value is high, though it can feel like watching a cartoon at times, and yes, a lot of money gets dumped into these movies. But for me, these pictures feel like soulless, cynical remakes to cash in on a big name and earnest fan base. No, the only true Godzilla films, in my opinion, are the Japanese Toho productions. Now, I know I'm going to upset a lot of fans with this next criteria, but I am leaving off every Versus film in the Godzilla franchise. Yes, I know Mothra, Rodan, Mechagodzilla, and Ghidorah are awesome kaiju characters, but I feel that the Versus films confuse and misdirect the original purpose of the monster that is Godzilla. For example, in many of the Showa-era Godzilla films, he is a hero, not a villain. And Godzilla is never quite a villain, but he is supposed to be an unstoppable force, fitting with the themes of nuclear destruction. Godzilla became more similar to Gamera by the late 1960s, a franchise pandering to children rather than a dark and intense allegory. Now, to be fair, Godzilla in Versus films is still sometimes the antagonist, or at times he is a more chaotic, neutral character, but all of this muddles the purpose of the lumbering Leviathan. So I have decided that the purest form of Godzilla in film are the films where it is Godzilla versus humanity. So with all of that out of the way, I'm going to offer a short list of 3 films that I think can be taken seriously and admired by any true film buff. My number 3 film is The Return of Godzilla, or Godzilla 1985, which is the Americanized version. This movie deals heavily with nuclear weapon themes. In fact, it is the only Godzilla film to feature the use of an atomic weapon. This movie is often criticized for its effects, but we must remember that this is one of the most legitimately terrifying Godzillas ever to grace the screen. The Soviet Union and America spar, as this is the height of the Cold War, and Japan is caught in the middle while Godzilla turns the island nation into a fiery hellscape. The Americanized version brings back Raymond Burr as Steve Martin, a nod to the original Americanized Godzilla, Godzilla King of the Monsters. The Americanized version does edit and manipulate the original story, making the Soviets come off as the villain and America as a heroic ally. Truly, this is one of the best Godzilla movies ever made. Coming in at number 2 is Shin Godzilla from 2016. This is the most recent Toho-produced Godzilla film, and it is the very first of the Reiwa era. More films are on the way, but this film is excellent for a number of reasons. Directed by Hideki Anno, the creator of anime like Neon Genesis Evangelion, this film captures and modernizes the themes of Godzilla. The movie uses the monster as a metaphor for the Fukushima nuclear disaster, and it is politically charged and brilliantly directed, serving as a criticism of Japan's inept and slow-moving government. Shin Godzilla features Toho's first CGI monster, and this version of Godzilla is truly terrifying as it evolves into multiple forms to its final, frightening version. Godzilla receives new powers, and he is truly an unstoppable force of destruction. With a budget of only $15 million, the quality of the film in an era of $500 million budgets is truly impressive. The most important Godzilla film that every fan should watch is pretty obvious, but some G fans have never seen it, and that is Gojira from 1954. Now, there are a lot of people today that will outright reject the Americanized version of this film, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, but I think that is a mistake. Yes, I know the Americanized perspective cuts down on the anti-nuclear political rhetoric of Gojira, and it puts the movie in an American perspective, but this was a pretty innovative way to bring a foreign monster film into the American film market. Raymond Burr is a charming lead in this version, and I like to think of Godzilla King of the Monsters as a complementary film to the original, so I would recommend people watch both. But if you can only watch one, then watch Gojira. This movie is dark, destructive, and truly horrifying. Released less than a decade after the atomic bombs dropped onto Hiroshima and Nagasaki, this movie is daring and one of the most powerful political commentaries and most important movies in film history. So that's my list based on the qualities that matter to me in a Godzilla film, but I would love to know your thoughts. What 3 films would you recommend for any new G fan? Thanks for watching.